All right, guys, welcome to Transforming Lives. My next guest is Emily Adams, and I'm going to bring her on to the stage. Emily, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Well, awesome. I'm glad that you could join me on the Transforming Lives podcast. So, usually, what I do is I ask people because, again, they're not. Well, I'm from Mississippi, and they're not in Mississippi, and we know that we live in this hemisphere of whatever weather shows up, shows up. I usually ask people, "How is the weather where you're at?"
I am from St. Petersburg, Florida. The weather is a little cloudy, but it is nice and warm. I think it's like 78 or 80 this morning.
Oh wow! You see
Yeah.
the look. You said 70 before you got the 70. I was like, "No way."
Yeah,
That's
it's
beautiful.
been a nice winter.
Right, exactly. Winter where? Well, awesome. So again, definitely glad to have you on and to have this conversation around leadership. Leadership, and you may have your person that's your leadership person, and many have their different people. For me, it's John Maxwell, and one of the things he talks about leadership is influence. No more, no less. And have this conversation around leadership is important, and especially when we talk about transformation. So we want to start out by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your background. Let the listeners know who you
Yeah,
are.
a little bit about myself, my background. So I always say I was not supposed to be a leader. And this is kind of one of those things where even though you have all the cards stacked against you, you get to
Yeah.
choose what destination and how you're going to lead yourself through it.
Hmm.
And so going back, just to give you a backstory, I was born and raised in the Amish culture. And for those that don't have the education around this, it is a very male dominant culture. And it is very much women aren't supposed to be leaders, the men are the leaders. And they have, all the say so. The women don't have any say so. They're just there to have children, and that's it. So there's no career, there's no nothing. Fast forward, the rebel child here. I decided to leave the Amish culture at 17. That was not a decision I made overnight. It was one of those things I never felt like I felt like fit in. I was definitely not your typical Amish girl of learning to cook, clean, and sew. I was out with my dad. I was
Right.
tomboy. I was in my dad's business. Like my dad had multiple businesses, and then left the Amish culture, and that was a huge culture shock. And so, from an education perspective, I went to eighth grade, which is equivalent to a sixth grade education in the elementary world,
Mm.
and decided, I was going to get my GED. I was going to become this career woman. And then I got pregnant at 18. And I was like, what? Like, I had no intentions of ever having any children, zero intentions.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
ended up having two boys, went through a horrible, abusive divorce. And then I decided I was going to go and get a degree. And that's where I went to Purdue, graduated in 4 years, working full time in the automotive industry as a supervisor. So, as a leader in the manufacturing world, which is very, very challenging as a female,
Right.
learned a lot of great lessons there.
Right. Yeah.
And then fast forward, went into the software industry. And then me and my business partner decided to start our business, Transformative Leadership, where we focus on operations and transforming leaders. And we do it in the leadership transformation side is a mix of spirituality, self-development, and what we learn in the manufacturing industry. So we bring like all of it together, like the practical tools and,
Hmm.
the other tools together. Um, so yeah, that's what I do now. I know that's a long intro, but we'll stop there.
Oh no, that's good. I mean, that's what happens with transformation. It's not this, pretty book that we read, and let's go to page 3, and at page 4, this happened. Transformation is disruptive. That's what it is, right? Um, and to hear you uh, list your journey, this is what we want to have conversations about, because when you look at the industry, in many industries don't have enough time to kind of lay that out. As a woman, it is a lot of barriers that you have to step over. um, and tough conversations that you have, and sometimes you're not heard.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like the not being heard started at a very young age, right? As a Amish girl, like you weren't heard, seen, or respected at all. And I had to
Mhm.
learn and develop that. And shout out to powerlifting. Powerlifting really gave me my power back and also allowed me to see like I can stand up for myself. So I competed in powerlifting competitively for 4 years and went to worlds. And that journey was a journey of like weight loss. But my mindset was like, that's where I realized like I can do anything that I set my mind to. Like my goal, is 1,000
Yeah.
pound total. Like I'm just gonna go for, and everyone was like, "You're a mom. Like, what are you doing?" Like powerlifting was not cool back in 2016 when I started. I think there was like maybe 6 or 7 girls in the flight of powerlifting, and now it's become a lot more popular. But even that gave me a lot of my power back. But then also the men that were in that sport,
Hmm.
they showed true brotherhood. Like I lifted with a bunch of firefighters and they were amazing because they were like, here, like we'll teach you these things. And that really gave me like the power back and to start seeing myself. And that translated then into my career and really take a stand and be an advocate. At the same time, it also helped me to highlight people that are not seen. And I could
Right.
be like, hey, they're not being seen. Let's go ahead and like see like the bigger picture.
Right. So, how in the world do we meet up? And number one, we find out. I find out that that you were in the Amish culture. But then number two, you power lift. Like that was my thing. Like I did it in high school. I won a state title in high school doing powerlifting, and then eventually I went off maybe a year after and competed in Arkansas for a for opportunity for a title. And then I coached it once I became a coach in high school. So it's like I'm listening to you, and I'm being patient to let you finish your thought there. But I was like, hold up. I don't have my sound effects over here, but I'm like, time out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I love it. Yeah.
It was such a huge shift too, because like you never work out in the Amish culture. Like you're working 6 days a week. You're not going to be working out. Right. And so when I started my weight loss journey, I ran a lot of Spartan races because I like to compete against myself. I like to see how much I can push myself mentally, spiritually, and physically.
Right.
It's just a mindset I have and I go for it. And then I went to the Arnold one year in Ohio and this guy asked me, he's like, hey, do you powerlift? And I was like, what is powerlifting? Like,
Yeah.
no, I have no idea. And I was just trying to buy knee sleeves so I could squat better. And
Right.
he's like, oh, I've got a group of guys in Indy, that you can go powerlift with. And then I realized I was strong and I was hooked. Like after that, I was hooked.
Right. Once you start powerlifting, and I love how you develop this thought of saying how it shifted your mindset. Because one of the things when we talk about transformation is, a lot of times we look at, sometimes people look at the outward shift, but the inward shift is that's the first stages of, and powerlifting does that because there's no, you might have that type of cheerleader, those people around you to kind of say, hey, come on, let's go. But it's something that happens on the inward parts of you to say, I got to get this weight off of me, or I got to look, I got like, when they do this down, like you got to make it happen. It is what it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So cool, man. This is a small world. Like that's awesome. When you're discussing, um, the powerlifting, you stepping out of the Amish culture, you becoming a mom. You've touched on, transformation. What was the most significant transformation that maybe that led you into your business or even shape who you are as a leader?
I would say the biggest one in 2019, I went through a huge spiritual awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what a spiritual awakening was. And that led me down a very healing journey. And that was probably the biggest transformation that I had, to really be able to go back, forgive the whole entire Amish culture, forgive my parents, because, the shunning process, the trauma that comes with that.
Yeah.
That was the biggest, that was the biggest moment. And also what led me to start my business was leaders need these tools. They need to be able to learn how to practice mindfulness. How do you forgive? How do you hold yourself accountable, but at the same time, love yourself unconditionally in the process? So I'd say that was my biggest transformation.
Okay. All right. So there are several things that I feel like we need to pause for a moment and kind of have a conversation about. Number one is, forgiveness is one thing, right? But, when you start talking about forgiving a culture or the people within a culture, how was that? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, and there's layers to forgiveness. There are layers to forgiveness, and when you sit in a cult and you go ready to leave, just to kind of paint a picture, you leave this cult, your parents come in, they brainwash you, all these things to keep you there. The church
Right.
comes in, they do the same thing. And everyone, hates you at that point.
Yep.
And I had to understand and accept that they choose this culture. And so I can still respect them and accept that they get to choose that. Now, what I will not accept is disrespect.
Yeah.
So, I lost my nephew in February of last year and had to go back to this culture that I hadn't really been back to, right? And so seeing people I hadn't seen for 17 years. And in that moment is where the foundation of my leadership was really tested. And I had to be like, oh, I forgave these people. But then when you're face to face, it's sometimes a different story. And in that moment, I had to choose what direction, what is my character? What is my character now? And I choose to forgive. But at the same time, I didn't allow the disrespect. So if you, passively said something to me, I just lovingly called you out and was like, we don't really talk like that anymore.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I did my 6-hour drive from Dallas. All right. So we're down this lane. All right. I'm there. You just laid out this idea that many people in the world struggle with, of setting boundaries and setting, number one is to forgive. That's one thing, right? But to really test, have you really forgave the person, is to have the interaction with the person, because it's like, you way over there, but then when I see you, do I embrace the emotions that I feel? Because I feel something. Do I embrace them? Or do I say, you know what, that's not me? And then how do I set those boundaries up to say, no, we don't talk like that anymore? Like, oh man, that's yeah.
The boundaries is probably the most challenging, especially when you have to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tell family and friends that have known you your entire life, that's no longer allowed. That's probably the most challenging ones, especially if you have people pleasing or you've been a, recovery people pleaser. That's going to be really challenging because now you're taking that power back. And when it comes to forgiveness, I always say, if you choose to not forgive, you're the one that's drinking the poison, not them. So it's forgive and move on, but at the same time, having those boundaries in place.
Right. So, they refer to what you just said as bars. So you just dropped some bars there. That's bars. This whole idea of drinking the poison, and the problem with that is, until it's acknowledged or there is some awareness brought to the table, you don't really realize that you're drinking the poison. Yeah, you need people to have to come into your life to cause a disruption, to allow you to see differently. And it's different for every person. It's not this linear path that you take. This is so what key principles or values guide you in your decision making as a leader?
Ooh, decision making has been a beautiful journey. And for the
Mm.
longest time, I felt like I could not make good decisions. I had that story for the longest time. And the automotive in my career, 100%, I was the most confident decision maker in the world because I had a process. Gap analysis, boom. These are your risks, boom. Let's make this decision, let's run. Like I just looked at numbers. But when it comes to personal life, that's not always the case, right? You can't just look at the numbers. You have to use your intuition, and learning to trust my intuition, my connection with God, and to really trust myself in decision making process has been an incredible journey. And one of the biggest tools that helped me the most, that was very eye opening, was learning my human design. So by human design, I'm a manifester. And what that means, the design, we don't make decisions like this.
Right.
We need to slow down and wait. And so now, and need to make decisions in a neutral space. So I would make decisions when I was in a high and when I was in a low, never in a neutral space. So I changed the way I made my decisions and being in a neutral, calm space, and then also asking, what is influencing this decision? Am I looking for outside? Am I asking outside advice that I should not be asking? Should I, do I need to spend more time in meditation and prayer and being very mindful with that decision-making process? So now my process is when I need to make a decision, especially in my business, I will say I give myself 24 to 48 hours.
Right.
And in that time, I will know what the right decision is. And every single time, it never fails. But it's been a journey.
Oh, that's good. Because finding that balance, like you're talking about, is important. And like you, I had to learn that too as a coach, where I was a former head coach of a high school football team, and I learned. There's probably books on it somewhere. I've learned not to talk to anybody after a game, whether it was parents. Of course, there was media. I had to kind of talk to them, but I've learned to take that break, whether that's that 24 to 48 hours, because you sometimes are on a high and sometimes you may be on a low, and you're like, well, this is what I saw in the game. And then you're just like, this is a soundbite that they're going to play on the news, or they're going to put in the newspaper, and 100% of the time they did. So I love that. I think leaders have to find that strategy so that they're able not to make, rash decisions, or when you're at the pinnacle of your emotions. Like that's huge. That's the conversation worth having there.
Yeah, I feel like it's so huge too, because we live in a society that wants a decision now. And it's okay to have that boundary of like, no, I need 24 to 48 hours to make a decision, and I won't make a decision out of it. Or, if it's something in the future, I need to understand how I'm going to feel in that moment before I decide.
Oh, I agree with you. Like that's good for leaders. And whether this is school leaders, whatever capacity that you serve in. And again, a parent is a leader 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day. The parents are leaders in helping out our children make decisions, even though they're working to become mature. You mentioned about your son, your oldest son, is when he graduates, he's going to have an associate degree, and you have a 15-year-old. So kind of share, what were some guiding, things that led you to kind of push your oldest son to go ahead and pursue that associate degree while he was in high school?
Well, let's just say the year before he went to college, he had, I think there was 50 absence. And the school, they go to a school that's a little bit, doesn't have a whole lot of funding. And I was like, we've got to make a change. If we don't, he's going to get in the wrong crowd. I saw him like be more depressive. He wasn't like wanting to work out. And in our household, we have a rule that you have to work out at least 3 to 4 times a week. It doesn't matter if it's yoga. It doesn't matter if it's running, walking, whatever it is, you have to move your body. And so I saw these trends, and I went into the school and I asked the school, I was like, hey, what can we do to get him into a better space? And the school told me, look, he's fine. He's at a 4 point, I think he was at a 4.0. Like, you don't have to worry. His grades are on point. They weren't even worried about his absence that he had. And I told them, I was like, no, that's not acceptable. We need a different option. And I want a different option now. So,
yeah.
And then the lady comes back to me. She goes, oh, well, he could go to college next year and do dual enrollment. And I was like, sign him up. I came home and I told him, I was like, you're going to college next year. And that's the end of the story. He was mad for about a week, but he just told me, I think it was last month, he was like, I can't believe that I'm going to graduate with my associates and I have a full ride for my bachelor's degree to finish his bachelor's degree. He's getting a full ride. And I was like, yeah, that goes to show, like, if I hadn't choose to push you and to tell you this, because he was freaking out for about 3 months, whether he could handle college or not. And I was like, you can handle college if you miss 50 days in school and still maintain a 4.0.
Right.
So
I don't want to touch that. That. But again, it points to the importance of when you talk about school, when you talk about just school in general, it's several layers. You have your stakeholders, right? And I think, a lot of times we put the emphasis on whether that's the district leader, whether that's the teachers, whether that's the parents. I think one of the most important parts of it is that third stakeholder of the parents, because even though the teachers, the school leaders are going to see them, whatever hours a day, but parents still have that influence.
Yeah.
And that's, it's great to hear. And when you were talking, I was trying to play out the scenario in my head. You come home and, you're talking to your son and you're like, well, all right, you're going to college next year. What? College? Like, I'm just in high school. This is college, but it worked out. It sounds like it's working out for his good.
Oh, 100%. And the conversation was one of those of like, hey, I'm not going to force you to go, but these are your options. And you cannot afford, and he took I raised my voice to be very mindful in the way that we communicate and we talk and we respect each other. And so in the process, I was like, he goes, well, I just need some time. So if you need time, before you respond, you can take time. He goes, I just need some time. And so I would check in on him and he was like, no, he's like, I need like a day or two. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give you time and I'm going to give you space. And when you're ready to talk about it, we're going to sit down and talk about it. We're going to have a conversation about it.
I'm trying to hold it together because I just know, because I deal, I work with high school students, middle school, elementary, and I'm just processing this. Like, it's not like I'm getting a new car. It's like, this is more work. You're telling me I'm moving to more work. However, I definitely see the bigger picture now that you are now leaving high school, 17 years old, pushing into 18, and you're going to be, on the ledge of moving into a bachelor's degree. Like that's fast track.
Yeah, and not to mention, we were talking about even him going into college, the different friends he now has, right? I was like, you're not being offered weed in the bathroom anymore. Like, your friends are actually putting you in places, like you guys are doing outreach in Tampa, like you're feeding the homeless. You're very active in the community now because that's the friends that you have and you've surrounded yourself with. So it's a completely different atmosphere.
Oh, that's good, because even with elevation, what happens with elevation, you meet these different people, and and I know from a parent standpoint, it's like, yes, this had a major impact here. It wasn't just in the academic space, like we planned it to be, but this was the social space as well. Yeah, This is good to hear. And definitely shout out to him as well, and to your younger son as well on those tracks as well, because I'm away. I got a 13-year-old. I'm gonna look down the road. I got a ways to go, but I'm seeing this relationship that happens where you have the older does it, the younger now has a different outlook on how to
Yeah.
approach life.
Yeah, and I think, well, I mean, my youngest is he's 15, but I always joke and say he's more like 35. And so his approach in life is very much very different. And we've been very open in the way that I parent. You have to
Right.
respect me. Well, if you need to have a conversation, whatever, we can have those conversations. I'm not on a pedestal as your parent, but at the
Yeah.
same time, we're going to have conversations. And so he, and just to kind of give you, he practices a lot of like spirituality, and he studied Buddhism and was like a vegetarian for 6 months.
Hmm.
And so his outlook is completely different. And he's so involved in music that even though he goes to school where, yeah, he gets offered weed almost on a daily basis, he was like,
Right.
I'm just there strictly for what the program has to offer me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's night and day.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. I get it. I get it. I get it. Trust me. I resonate with the 35. It's just a younger one is. Oh, well, cool. Yeah. You know, towards the kind of end of a conversation we have on Transforming Lives podcast, we have a 2-minute warning. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, you have to take up 2 minutes, but that's just a football analogy that I kind of use to kind of close it out. So basically what happened is you have the floor, and you're speaking to that leader. You're speaking to whether that's a parent, whether that's a business owner, whether that's, a woman that is looking to be empowered. You got the floor, and let me know, and I'll jump back on. I'm going to put myself in the background. You got the floor.
so since I have the floor, I always like to make sure that I provide valuable and actionable steps you can take as a leader. And so one of the things that as we're going, leaving 2024 in the past and looking in 2025, doing a lot of reflection. And I know not everybody likes these words of accountability, responsibility. So I really want to break it down for leaders that want to elevate, and some really easy steps that they can take to really elevate and transform their lives in whatever that transformation looks like, whether that's your weight loss, whether that's your relationships, career, business, or whatever it may be. So I like to break it down in 4 steps. One is the evaluation process, really evaluating where you are at and where you are going, not letting outside forces have this like impact on you, but where do you want to go? Where does your spirit, where does your soul want to go? And really getting clear on that. And then from there, creating an action plan, because we all need accountability as leaders. As much as some of us try to avoid accountability, that's probably the thing that we need the most, whether it's the accountability to show up and continue to lead, or the accountability to love ourselves deeper. We all need that. And then this third step is executing that action plan and taking action. So if you're trying to develop some of your skills as a leader, whether it's a course, a book, get coaching or mentoring, put yourself in different places, environments to really help you elevate. And then the last step is reflection, to reflect of like the whole process. And I believe in all leaders, we are all meant to, every single human, whether you identify as leader or not, we are all called to grow, elevate, and expand. And we all have the choice to do that. And some of us are forced. Others, we make that decision. So whatever your soul is calling you to, listen and choose to elevate. Did I make the 2-minute warning?
Oh, you're good. No, this is perfect. And that's what it's about, is having candid conversations that, help transform your life, but also understanding that transformation happens over time. So and it has actionable steps, and that bad word called accountability cannot be avoided. If you're going to do, if you're going to stay on the pathway to transformation. So, Emily, I am thankful that we had this conversation and we met up because it was value that was added to the listener. I'm going to tell you, listeners' lives and for my life too as well, of having this conversation with you. Uh,
Mhm.
how how can we reach out? Well, finish your thought. Pause. Finish your thought. Go
No,
ahead.
I was just gonna say thank you. That's the greatest honor that I can have as a leader is to share my knowledge and share wisdom, and whether that gets you one step closer or 50 steps closer, that's my life's mission.
Absolutely. Well, again, listeners will want to know how can they get in contact with you? How can they reach out to you? How can they get more information about your business?
So my website is transformativeleadershipllc.com. And then if you find me on any of my social media platforms, I'm under Emily Adams, very active on LinkedIn and Threads. The other platforms, not as much, but my inboxes are always open. Feel free to reach out. My email's out there on my website as well. Feel free to, if you have any questions, want resources, I'm always happy to have conversations.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to drop you in the background, close this thing out. And if you don't mind, 3 to 5 minute brief conversation at this end. All right. Good. Thank you very much. All right, guys. So you just heard from Emily Adams. This was a conversation that was put together in a way that it needed to go. And I'm excited about the value that she brought to the podcast, to this podcast right here. Very genuine, authentic conversation around leadership. And in leadership, we understand it's not just in the business world, it's in the personal and our personal.